welcome back to It's an Inside Job podcast. I'm your host, Jason Lim. Now, this podcast is dedicated to helping you to help yourself and others to become more mentally and emotionally resilient so you can be better at bouncing back from life's inevitable setbacks. Now, on It's an Inside Job, we decode the science and stories of resilience into practical advice, skills, and strategies that you can use to impact your life and those around you. Now, with that said, let's slip into the stream. Well, welcome back to another episode of It's an Inside Job, where we dive deep into the themes of resilience, leadership, and well-being. Well, today's episode is full of practical insights that's going to help you take charge of your health and well-being. Now, some of the key benefits you'll gain from tuning into this episode was using HRV to track your health. You'll discover how heart rate variability, or HRV, how it can serve as an invaluable tool for monitoring your body's stress levels and shifting your focus from simply preventing disease to achieving overall well-being. While another benefit, that's overcoming stress with self-awareness. You're going to learn how modern psychosocial stressors like constant comparison and negativity bias, how it impacts our mental health, and how building self-awareness can help you break free from these patterns. Now, a third benefit, balancing your lifestyle for better health. You're going to gain insights into how integrating sleep, nutrition, exercise, stress management can be supported by wearable technologies, to improve your health and activate your parasympathetic nervous system for more restorative rest. And your parasympathetic, that's that rest digest part of your autonomic nervous system. Now, don't worry, we're going to go do a deep dive and explain all of this, or at least my guest will. Now, that's just the low-hanging fruit benefits. There's going to be plenty of other practical and fascinating takeaways you'll discover by listening to this episode. So who's my guest? Well, his name is Dr. Torkil Færø. He's a GP, emergency physician, an award-winning photographer, filmmaker, and the author of the best-selling book, The Pulse Cure. Now, in this conversation, Torkil shares his insights from his personal journey and his expertise on how to use modern tools like smartwatches and HRV tracking to find balance and reduce stress in our fast-paced lives. So without further ado, let's slip into the stream and meet Dr. Torkil Færø. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone back to It's an Inside Job. Today, I have a special treat. I have a brilliant man, a brilliant doctor, and an author. He's a Renaissance man. Torkil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Very nice to be here.
I was wondering, could we kick off the conversation by you briefly introducing who you are and why we are here today together?
Yeah, at least I know who I am. So I am a doctor. I've been a doctor for 25 years. I'm a freelance doctor, and because the reason why I became a doctor in the first place was to be able to travel the world. I knew that as a doctor, the body and the mind are the same all over the world. I had been traveling in Australia, in Canada, and I got to understand that as a doctor, you can work part-time and then go traveling and live your life. And that was what I wanted, was an adventurous life, to experience as much of the world as I could in these 80 years that we are hopefully granted on the earth. And I found that being a doctor would be great. It's like sitting on the front row to life, to see life unfold in front of you and to have a role in it, so that you are there when the dramatic things happen, when everyday things happen, and you see what do people do and why do they do it? So that was my drive towards becoming a doctor, which is different than most people's drive, which would be to help people and to be very interested in health, which I was not. So treating people and understanding health was kind of my ticket into the curiosity of knowing what people do. So it was not until my father died at 73 from cancer that I understood that, okay, I need to take a look at my own health here. I need to change the way I am, because I was weighing 20 kilos or 40 pounds overweight. I did not exercise. I did not care about what I was eating. As a doctor, I was used to working night shifts and not caring much about sleep either. So basically, everything that I would later write about in the Pulse Cure, I did wrong. And I was drinking probably 3 glasses of wine every day. And so I was also using nicotine. I was using snus that we may know in Norway. And I was smoking for at least 10 years. So because even as a doctor, we didn't think that it mattered so much what you did with your lifestyle. We had the impression that if you did everything right, you may live for 2 or 3 years longer. But making the food from the bottom, sleeping longer, exercising, all this would maybe take even more than 2 or 3 years to do. So, of course, this proved to be very wrong. So now we know that you can, if you do all the right things, you can live 24 years longer. And that is also my clinical impression from paying attention to when people die. You know, part of the job of being a general practitioner in Norway is writing death certificates. And I could clearly see that the ones who live beyond their 90s, they have checked on all these different things, that they have done all the right things. And if you do all the wrong things, you'd be lucky to pass 70. So I can understand that. So anyway, so my entrance into the medical field and my career in the medical field has been different. Actually, I thought I was jumping off the career train at the first possibility, because the first thing I did after my internship was to buy a car in the States and go traveling to Mexico for 4 months. And then when I ran out of money, I came back. And for many years, that was my lifestyle. So that I am the first person to write a book on how to use wearables and heart rate variability to track our health. That is beyond my comprehension. That is because I'm kind of just a normal doctor. But the power of the tool of the wearables and heart rate variability and being able to track your autonomic nervous system is a game changer that can totally change the whole way we look at medicine. It turns the focus from disease until avoiding disease, and it takes the power from the doctors and the healthcare system into your own hands in real time, accessible at all times. So it's a big shift. And that is why we're talking.
Yeah, definitely. I don't say this to compliment you, but as an observation, I found the Pulse Cure. As I told you pre-interview, that I devoured that book within 2 days. I'm quite voracious when it comes to reading, especially when they're very science-based. But you write in such a way, you're like a scientific journalist. You can take the complexities of the science, of the physiology and such, and you write in a way that any layperson can read. And there is one quote, well, there's a number of quotes, but the one if you don't mind if I can read a quote from your book, you said, or you wrote, I'm sorry, we often place greater value on what we might be able to accomplish by treating the psychological part of the brain and end up undervaluing the potential that exists in treating the physiological part. We have a top floor to be proud of and impressed by. This part of the brain is also dependent upon having a solid foundation. This is the self-regulation nervous system, or the autonomic nervous system, ANS for short. And on this podcast, we were talking about, Torkil, that one of the major things we focus on is resilience, and another one being well-being, and of course, leadership, self-leadership in a sense too. But, I speak a lot to sort of the cognitive emotional base. But one thing that really resonated with your book, and that's why I pulled out this quote, it's the underlying physiological, because that sets, as you said so eloquently, it sets the foundation for everything. And something in psychology, we have something called core effect. And this really resonated with me because core effect is based on two things: the intensity of an emotion, and you also have the valence. Like, there's no bad or good emotions, but there's emotions that are very comfortable, and there are that are very uncomfortable. And that always explains to me. I was wondering why core valence was, if we don't sleep enough or we're hungry. But again, your book was able to, at least in when I read it, bring it down to the autonomic nervous system. I was wondering, could you speak a little to the autonomic nervous system and explain to our listeners from a doctor's perspective what that is and why it's core to the foundation of who we are?
Yeah, so the autonomic nervous system is the base, the foundations in our brain. So it's a system that we share with all vertebrates, all mammals. So it's an ancient system, like 100 million years old, and basically unchanged through that time. So it's like we're having what I call in the book, it's like we are having a living fossil at the bottom of our brains that we have been overlooking as doctors. We hardly learned anything about it in medical school, just that it was a fight, flight, and freeze system and rest and digest. So anyone like me who was never scared and never fighting or never fleeing from anything, I would assume that I would be in the parasympathetic state all the time because the autonomic nervous system is divided in two parts. It's divided in the sympathetic part, which activates us and mobilizes us towards what we want or away from what we don't want, something that's chasing us or something scary. And we're supposed to be in that state 2-3 hours every day. That we can see when we put these wearables on hunter-gatherers that still exist today. The rest of the time, we're supposed to be in the parasympathetic mode, the restful mode. And in our modern day, we are not so much in this state. We are turned on to some degree round the clock. And we are not constructed to tolerate this. It's not a sustainable physiology. We will get sick, and we do. It's estimated that 80% of the modern day lifestyle diseases that we treat now is based in too much stress that results in a low-grade chronic inflammation. That will manifest in all the body's organs, including the brain. And so we need to get control of this autonomic nervous system. And that is possible through the heart rate. Because what is so almost magical in its simplicity is that the heart rate can reveal whether we are in the stress state or in the de-stress state and the degree of it. And then we probably have to explain heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is a concept that I heard of the first time 5 years ago, which should tell you almost everything. Even as a doctor, I had never heard about it. I was reading it in a book in psychiatry from Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score, that the heart rate variability is a metric that they use in American psychiatry to evaluate their patients, whether something is working or not. And the heart rate variability is a way to look at your heart rate like through a magnifying glass. It's a more precise metric of your heart rhythm. And if you are in the parasympathetic mode, in the restful mode, then when you breathe in, the heart rate will go up a little bit. And when you breathe out and there's less oxygen in the lungs, the heart rate will go down a little bit. Not so very much, but it's measured in milliseconds. And if you are really restful, you can detect it by feeling your own pulse. It is just as, the ancient Greeks and Egyptian, Chinese doctors, Indian doctors would be able to feel the pulse and to feel the state of the patient. But if we are in the stressful state, then this ancient system interprets the stress that this is an organism in danger. We can't afford to relax now. We have to push through. The heart has to push through, even though there is less oxygen in the lungs. So it will be a very steady pace. And of course, with the modern technology, the smartwatches and smart rings and all these devices that are now just exploding in popularity can detect this and to give you an estimate of your stress in the moment and accumulated throughout the day and night. And through artificial intelligence and like millions of people using them, they can make good estimates of what would be a good sustainable balance for you, and give you the information. So this is the big revolution, I think, in modern medicine, where in my mind, and of course I'm biased, that this is as important for stress-related modern diseases that antibiotics are for the old diseases that are infectious diseases. So we're now treating inflammation-based diseases, where the other diseases that we have conquered, that is the infection-based diseases that we have vaccines and antibiotics and so. Yeah.
No, I find that fascinating what you're talking about with the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic, or what you wrote so eloquently in the book was the fight flight when we're activated and the rest digest, just to keep it simple for the conversation. What I found interesting, I didn't think about this. I always thought that, when we are on a sort of a neutral state, we're just ticking along, there's no stress or what have you, that, there is the balanced system. But what your book articulated, and I didn't know this, you said the the fight flight is permanently active, and it's about around 120 beats per minute. And then you described the rest digest, or the parasympathetics, like a brake. We can tap the brakes, and that we actively engage, it slows down the sympathetics. So our nervous system is our heart is between 50 to 80 beats per minute. So the 50 to 80, I understand that's sort of an average, but that's a good healthy range for the average person.
Well, that a healthy range, I would say, would be 50 to 65. So if you have a resting heart rate of 65, 70 up to 80, it's normal, but it's not healthy. So it's not optimal. So I would say that you should really have a resting heart rate measured by the wearables. They often measure at night. That should be less than 65, I would say. Then I would say that it's okay.
No, that's, I think, these numbers, the one thing I liked about the book, it is very measurable. As you said, we can take agency, we can take autonomy back and not constantly have to run to the doctors and get blood tests and all sorts of tests, but we can actually do it real time. And so what I'd like to do is maybe back up a little, because your book talks a lot about sort of what we can do physiologically, and I'd like to explore that to sort of activate the parasympathetic more, the rest digest part of our autonomic nervous system. But you also articulated sort of psychological stressors and sort of kind of the innate evolutionary programming that's part of our wetware, our brains. I call them psychosocial emotional stressors, or from my background, that's what we call them. And I was wondering if maybe we can talk about, there's three of them. First of all, you were talking about how we naturally compare ourselves, depending if we compare ourselves upwards to those who are more successful, or we compare ourselves downwards, how that can affect our autonomic nervous system. Could we explore the first one there for a second?
Yeah. As mammals, the strength of mammals for then 100 million years is that we compare ourselves to others, which reptiles and other don't do. But the mammals, it's kind of our job to evaluate whether your opponent is stronger or weaker than you. So that is our very, very special ability that we are using all the time. And if you look into the newspaper, you will see that, what are the news? Okay, somebody's going down, somebody's going up, somebody's fighting. Who's winning? So this is a constant game, and we do it all the time, even without thinking. And of course, in the old days, and the reason why we do that is because it's important for survival. Because then they didn't fight. There were less fighting when you could see clearly that I'm going to lose this fight. I'm not going to box against Mike Tyson. I'm going to lose, and both will profit from that. So it's been a survival method that has been good for mammals like us. And the trouble is that earlier we used to live in tribes of 150 people, and there was a limit to how much it would be every day, to compare yourself to these others. But now we are in contact with 150 million, through magazines and through the best people, the most beautiful people and richest people, and everyone, and we keep losing in this game. So we feel inferior a lot of the time. And just the action of comparing ourselves to others is a stressful thing. And the hormones, if we compare ourselves to others and we feel better, then we get serotonin, the release, the feel-good hormone. And if we lose the comparison, thumbs down, then we get cortisol, the stressful hormone. So, and this has been throughout evolutionary history. It's been something that made us survive. That we can speak here today is because our ancestors, like millions of years, like hundreds of millions of years back, have been doing their job and been good at this comparison. How would you say? Comparison. And but this is hurting us today. So today is not of use. It just keeps disturbing our lives, giving us stress. Is an obstacle to enjoying our time on Earth. So we have to kind of use our intellectual brain to overturn this mammalian brain from the limbic system where this function is, to say that I don't care about that. It was useful millions of years ago. Now I'm just going to enjoy my life. I'm not going to care whether anyone is richer and more beautiful than me.
The second one we talk quite often on this show, depending on the guest, which is the negativity bias, where we are, if I may just take liberties here, is where our brains automatically, again, tend to search for threats, danger, and hazards constantly in our environment. Our brains are like hypersensitive to trying to locate that. And so in psychosocial pressures, meaning that most people, at least in developed nations, are not constantly worried about being murdered or starving or what have you. But it's the psychosocial pressures, as you articulated, Torkil, in the first one, is where we're constantly comparing ourselves. And if we're not wary of that, we may see someone, they may say something to us, and then we see that as a threat. We see the negativity in that. And so the negativity bias. I was wondering, I found the third one very interesting too. The third psychosocial stressor was the extreme capacity for adaptation. Could you fill us a little in on that?
Yeah, so as humans, we are very good at adapting to our environments. This is why we have gone out to Africa and have inhabited every zone on the earth in the climate zone, and we can come into any situation, and after some time, we'll get used to it. So I remember, for example, going to Angola as a doctor. I worked for the Doctors Without Borders. It was as a student. So I was the first one going out to the Norwegian Doctors Without Borders. And just after a week in Angola, with mine injuries, with children dying at my hands every day, falling asleep to gunshot sounds, and being in this terrible place, where only 2 years earlier, half the population had been died because they had been under siege for 2 years, and half of them died. So there was so much tragedy happening. But anyway, suddenly that was normal. You have the capacity to be, okay, now this is my world. And it also goes the opposite way, so that even when you come back, then you take all this for granted. So even if we live in a way that humans throughout history would have been dying to achieve, we take it for granted. With it, like, you just shrug our shoulders, and because we adapt to it. So and that has again been the success formula for human beings to be able to achieve what we have been achieving. But it's also something that makes you kind of blasé about our current surroundings, and you look for the negatives. You get used to having everything that we have. and then don't think much about it. So we will be ungrateful, even if we have everything. And what shocked me most after in Angola was also to come there and see the happiness. I would expect, and this was before internet, so I would go there and expect just to see misery in these conditions. But I saw a joy of life that I've never experienced until I came to Ethiopia some years later, though. But I saw a joy of life that they didn't take every day for granted, and appreciated the moment, and they were together laughing more. What I remember from Angola is like laughing faces. And then I came home, and then I was not prepared. Because when I came home, I was just seeing sullen faces, unhappy faces. The newspapers full of complaining about small things.
Mm.
And then because I had originally planned to work only for like Doctors Without Borders and Red Cross, to go around the world, maybe in the war zones, working as a surgeon, war surgeon, and so on. That was one of my plans. But when I came back from Angola and saw that we had everything and we were still depressed, they should be depressed. But we that didn't have anything should be depressed. But we who had everything, we were depressed. And that was a puzzle that really tricked my mind. How come? How can this be? And this is, I think, part of the reason why, I wrote the Camera Cure and wrote the Pulse Cure. I think that this curiosity about how can this be has been kind of the foundation of this research and curiosity about how all the books I've read. I've read probably around now 500 books related to mastery, to psychology, to physiology, to find out why do we do what we do.
And it just shows that, these three psychosocial pressures that our brains are, we're just born with. It speaks to a lot, and you speak later that in the book, but it's about self-awareness. It's about being in the present and kind of actually checking with the narrative running through our head. As we say in clinical and cognitive science, the human operating system kind of goes from head to heart to hand. We think something, a narrative, and generally that's just automatically generated. And it's generated based on these three principles you've talked about. And then that triggers some sort of emotion. And then obviously the autonomic nervous system, and then that triggers the behavior, the hand, whether we either engage or disengage with life. And depending upon the either encouraging narrative going through our head or the discouraging narrative based on what you're saying, constantly comparing ourselves upwards, constantly searching for the negatives and problems in life, constantly chasing after what we don't have instead of, as you said, being in the present, appreciating and showing gratitude to what we have. And I believe, honestly, from my experience working with this so long, that self-awareness is the key to override this programming, as you've just mentioned, and also what you've written in the book.
Mm. Yeah. We have to override these feelings. Otherwise, they will destroy us unnecessarily. There's no reason for these feelings to crush your enjoyment of life, which it does to so many people. Which is why I wrote the Camera Cure. It's kind of a antidote to this thinking. But also, what's also interesting, is that even basic physiology below this mammalian brain, the reptilian brain, with the disturbance in sleep, in stress, caused by poor food, alcohol, lack of training, poor physiology, will also give a reaction that makes you feel bad. Yeah, so a lot of people say that after they ate differently, food that did not activate their stress system, their anxiety was gone. So it just shows that we have placed too much attention to the speaking part of our brains, and we as humans only started speaking at they estimate. Of course, they don't know; they didn't talk to them, but they estimate that we started speaking 200,000 years ago, and we have brains that are far older than that, and this non-verbal part of our brain is affecting our verbal part of the brain much more than we would like to. So we often ask, is it psychological or is it physical? But it's often physiological. It's somewhere there in between. So that I think is why so many people feel so much better when they get their stress system in balance.
Yeah, I'd like to hop into the physiological aspect of heart rate variability or HRV in a second. I just wanted to come back to what you talked about, the reptilian brain, because it's the reptilian brain, as you said, is the foundation for everything, psychological, cognitive, emotional, what have you. In your book, you wrote something about the reticular activating system. Now, I understand these are a ganglia just being a cluster of cells for the listeners that sit at the base of the brainstem. And I think it's linked to what you've talked about, the three sort of biases we have, negativity bias and looking upwards and such. I was wondering, could you explain a little about the reticular activating system and how it can function?
Yeah, the reticular activating system is kind of the basic system for attention. This is what makes, while you're walking in your own thoughts in the street and you hear a car squeaking, then you suddenly turn around or you see something unexpected happen in the periphery of your vision. You suddenly look there to see, can it be a threat? Or can it be something that I want? Can it be a nice looking lady or whatever? Depends on your brain. It's also what, if you go into the clothes shop and you take a quick look around, often you'll see, oh, that's a jacket I want. This is this attention system that quickly will find what you want and identify what you want or identify a threat. And it's as you say, in the base of our brain. So this is what keeps our attention going, and this is why it's a problem, because we are always looking for things. And of course, in our commercial world, there's always some messages that is going for the system. That you walk in the street and there's a commercial for clothes, and there's you can listen to the radio and they want you to buy this and this product, and so we are constantly bombarding this system with people that grabs a little piece of our attention. And you could think that this is not so harmful, but it takes just small chunks of the most valuable thing we have, which is time, which is a non-renewable thing, and we are constantly looking for everything that is trying to connect to us and trying to make money out of us. So anyway, so this automatic system. If we didn't have that, then we would not react to something dangerous or something that we want. So this is a kind of a basic thing that would make any reptile turn towards you when you come into their peripheral vision. Yeah.
Because after I read that section of the book, I kind of dived in and explored a little more about this this cluster of cells, the reticular activating system. We'll just call it the RAS. And it's just that, as you said, it's the heart of attention, and it's based upon what is important to us. So back to the 3 points you made in your book. If we're allowing negativity bias or comparison upwards or constantly regretting the things that we don't have or constantly striving, well, these become what's important to us. They become the filters in which our reticular activating system is constantly searching for. And obviously, that kind of psychological narrative will trigger uncomfortable emotions, which will obviously, trigger our stress system or the sympathetic, the fight flight. And what you said before is that self-awareness of, being appreciative, showing gratitude, kind of looking for the good things in life. This counteracts these wetware programming that evolutionary gave us. And this is also, I guess, a direct psychological or cognitive way to control, to some extent, the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, exactly. And this is also our reticular activating system is working like the algorithms in Spotify and in Facebook, in exactly the same way. It's trainable. So it's like this artificial intelligence inside of our heads, which, because of course, when we walk into the same clothing store, the two of us will look at two different things, because this reticular activating system has learned that, okay, this guy likes red coats, and this guy likes leather. So we will immediately go to two different places and react to different things. And it works just like the algorithms, that it kind of thinks, okay. And this I've been exploring a lot as a photographer, because I've been teaching photographic workshops in 60 workshops in 11 countries all around the world, in Ethiopia, Cuba, Sri Lanka, Palestine, many places. And what continues to amuse me is that how different we see. That if I put these 15 participants out in the same village, they will come back with totally different pictures. And so their reticular activating system, this is where I got into this interest, will point them to different places based on their history up till now. So, and once you can exploit that and you work with your reticular activating system, then you will take better pictures. If you take pictures that you think you were supposed to take, I can see that immediately if it's not in tune with your reticular activating system, because you will not be good at that. So, but often you will overvalue this way and underestimate your own experiences that makes you take better pictures if it's in tune with your personality.
In the first part of the episode, Torkil shares his journey toward better health, spurred by his father's death from cancer. Realizing that his own unhealthy habits could shorten his life, well, Torkil transformed his lifestyle and his career focus. He emphasized the importance of adopting habits that can extend longevity. He introduced the concept of tracking health with variables, particularly heart rate variability, HRV, shifting the focus from disease prevention to personal well-being. Torkil explained that how modern technology like smartwatches, well, how it can help regulate our stress by balancing the autonomic nervous system. We also did a deep dive into the impact of psychosocial stressors. With Torkil highlighting how evolutionary traits like comparison and the brain's negativity bias, well, how that can contribute to modern-day stressors. He also emphasized the importance of self-awareness and managing negative thought patterns, explaining the physiological and the psychological factors that influence mental well-being. There is no doubt that psychological resilience and emotional resilience are two skills that we all need to find a more robust mindset. But underlying that entire principle is physiological resilience. And that's what we're going to talk about and discover in part 2 of my conversation with Torkil. Because here we're going to dive deep into heart rate variability, but also the smartwatches, the technology that empowers us to track our own health and to monitor and to make cognizant decisions to improve our health, to improve our energy, to improve how we manage stress, whether that's emotional, whether that's psychological. But the foundation to it all, folks, it's the physiological part. Well, let's slip back into the stream into part 2 of my fascinating conversation with Dr. Torkil Færø. I think one of the important things that you stipulate in the book, it is very individual. So Jason shouldn't compare himself to Torkil per se, and Torkil shouldn't compare himself to a good friend or a colleague and such. Is that what I understand?
Exactly. So the heart rate variability will be different for each person, and there's supposed to be 30 to 50% individual personal genetic variation. So that means that even if you go to population study and you put 10,000 people in, then the lower the heart rate variability, the more disease of any kind. And you can just Google almost any kind of disease and add heart rate variability, and you will find connection to that. But if you go on an individual basis and go into these 10,000 people and pick out two people, it does not necessarily mean that one with a higher HRV has a better health than one with a lower. Chances are that this is true, but it doesn't need to be. So because of the big genetic variation. So you shouldn't compare yourself to others, but to your own optimal heart rate variability. So say that you take 1 week where you relax, you're out in the sun to some extent, you eat the right food, you sleep, you exercise a little bit, and so on. So then you can see, okay, what is your optimal heart rate variability when you are really relaxed? Yeah.
And I think also in the book you mentioned, other than just genetics, genetical 30% influence, you also talked about age, you talked about gender, you talked about the season. For example, in right now, when we're recording here, we're moving into autumn, but this will be maybe a better season for our heart rate variability than, say, deep winter, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. So this would be the right way to start on after the new year and make these changes. We would have a better chance now that we have a better heart rate variability. We are rested after the holiday, or hopefully, and we have more willpower, because heart rate variability is also coupled to willpower. The higher heart rate variability, the easier it is to resist temptations. Which, of course, is why they put all the temptations at the end of the store, when you have less heart rate, less willpower left. Because willpower is, you can deplete your willpower by making choices. It gets lower. So, yeah. I don't remember the question again, but
yeah, well, it wasn't really a question. It was just a comment.
Yeah, the difference of ages, yeah, and it also has something to do with age. So the heart rate variability will fall quite steeply from your youth until you are maybe 45, and then it will flatten out. Which is the reason, of course, why Cristiano Ronaldo and other athletes that come into their 40s, although there are, like, literally in his case billions of kroners to be made, he will not be able to, because the body will not forgive and make sure that he will recover. And this is why also that you, as a doctor, I'm almost astonished by how much beating your body can tolerate until you're 40 without dying. But then after you're 40, 45, you really have to take care of your own health. Otherwise, you will be sick. Yeah.
So when we're looking at heart rate variability, is that the number, the RMSSD, is that the number we should be looking at?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
Apple Watch uses another metric, which is SDNN, but most of the devices will use the RMSSD. That is, I think, the best one.
Okay.
So,
okay.
And then you can see your heart rate variability over time. That is maybe the most important, to see the fluctuations over time, so you can identify, like, a 2-week period that, okay, this is going down. I need to step back a little now. Take it easy. Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is just, I'm wary of time. I'd like to maybe shift and not divulge all the answers in the book, but you have different stages of this travel, as you said, and I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Torkil, you've listed them based upon priority or how important. And the first one, which for me was a no-brainer, was sleep. But a lot of us, are like, we say, sacrifices of the sleep gods. I think you said it in the book. I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? But if you don't sleep, he's soon to be dead, per se, right? Can you speak a little to sleep? Because you mentioned about 8 hours being a healthy, but I've been reading that depending upon, it could be between 6.5 or 7 to 9 hours. I was wondering if you could expand on that.
Yeah, so it will be a difference in the sleep need also. So that would be somewhere from 7 till 9 hours. And it will be individual how much sleep you need. And it will also depend on your sleep consistency. So if you have a better sleep consistency, which means that you go to bed and wake up at more or less the same time every day, less than half an hour difference is good enough, then your brain will be very effective in going through the sleep phases. So then you can tolerate maybe 7 hours. I don't think that less than 7 hours. I've not seen less than 7 hours being recommended. So I think that's kind of a limit. So then probably you can go down to 7 hours. So I think most people should be around 8 hours. Some people may need 9 hours. I've heard. So and that is probably the most important thing you can do to give the possibility for your body and brain to recuperate through the night. So then you just put on an automatic system that does the job for you. You know, in all the other stages of what I call an expedition, it's something you have to do yourself. You have to choose whether to not drink alcohol or drink alcohol. You have to make the right food. You have to do the exercise. You have to quit smoking and using snooze and so on. So, but sleep, the body is made for that. So you just allow it to go to sleep. And we need more sleep than we thought. And it's not until maybe the last 10 years that we have been aware of the importance of sleep. That it's not just a nuisance if you're tired. It's dangerous. It can double the risk of cancer. If you, according to Matthew Walker with his excellent book, Why We Sleep, or Hvorfor vi sover in Norwegian, if you sleep less than 6 hours compared to more than 7 hours, you double your risk of cancer. And nobody told us that. And so I knew all the night watches I've had, you know, throughout my doctor career, you know, even though I felt terrible. You know, you never feel as terrible than between 4 and 5 o'clock when there's a patient coming, and maybe it's even unnecessary demanding patient, then you don't have much patience yourself. So it's not only uncomfortable, but it's downright dangerous. It's increasing your risks of cancer. So it's not good. And all this and I can see if I have a continuous glucose monitor, I can see that if I eat the same food after a night of poor sleep, my blood sugar will be a lot higher with the same food. So it's all connected. Everything is connected in this inflammation. So whether you don't sleep enough, if you're using snooze, nicotine, or alcohol, whether you are over or under trained, whether you eat food that you're not supposed to, whether you don't have the ability to calm yourself down, and if you have poor relations, and you are lonely, and if you are too warm, if you are too hot, all these things are connected to each other. And if you have the wrong microbiome, it's all connected. And if you don't get enough sun, also all these things are connected and makes for poor mitochondrial function and a poor autonomic nervous system function, and will have consequences in all of your organs. And the problem for us as doctors has been that we have been too specialized. So the kidney doctor looks at the kidney, and the psychiatrist looks at the brain and the ear, nose, and throat, you know, at the different departments, and the cardiologist at the heart. And we haven't really understood that the common denominator for all of these diseases that hit all these organs is chronic low-grade inflammation. Now we know that, and I think still, I would be surprised if more than 20% of the doctors know this. I think 80% of the doctors and healthcare professionals are not aware that chronic low-grade inflammation is a root cause of all these different diseases still.
And I think your book is, you know, it's a platform for us to educate ourselves, because just briefly, a sidestep, when you talked about the mitochondria, those are the little engine machines in our things, generate ATP, sort of the currency of the body. And we have the gut microbiome. I had Dr. Stephen Gundry on. He wrote some books on this from California. But I just want to backtrack to sleep. You know, because I think a lot of people think, oh, 8 hours, that's what I need. Okay, so I'll go to bed at 11, get up at 7. But people sometimes don't realize they have to calculate into that sleep time or being under the sheets that most people, at least from what I understand, can be awake an hour, you know, shifting, you know, going through the circadian rhythms and popping up every 90 minutes. And that it could be an hour and 20, hour and 30 minutes of wake time, but it's kind of sporadic throughout the night. So have I understood that wrong? Like, so if I need a roughly about 7 hours, 7 to 7.5 hours sleep, but I kind of calculate 8.5 hours. I'm in bed. Am I off target here, or
no? You're spot on. Yeah. So it's more or less if you're looking for 7.5 hours, I think you must be in bed at least 8 hours. 8 hours and 15 minutes, and it will probably be individual as well. But I find that I often will get half an hour less effective sleep than the time in bed. So it will be somewhere around that. Yeah.
Sorry, we're harping too much on sleep, but I think it's so key because you've also talked about the restorative switch, that the final 2 hours before we go to sleep is vital for effective sleep. Can we go down that rabbit hole?
Yeah. I love rabbit holes. So we need to wind down. We need to go softly in for landing to get our brains to go into the right sleep phases. I used to think it was totally opposite. That if I had been awake and was tired and was just crashing on my pillow, that must be a very good sleep. We called it in Norway. We called it a good sleep heart. Godt sovehjerte. But that proved to be, once I started using the wearables, that proved to be terrible sleep. You're too stressed. So the best sleep, I used an ECG monitor for the first 2 years. So I had 700 readings from an ECG monitor before I understood that Garmin had the same system in their watches. And then I took the 10% best nights and the 10% worst nights and tried to see, okay, where's the trick here?
Yeah.
And the trick was that I was in the parasympathetic restful state in the 2 hours before sleep. And then, of course, in the worst night, the opposite. I was in a stressful state until I went to sleep. And when I've been doing more reading, I see that this is also what other people find. And luckily, also, we have made a website called pulskuren.no, thepulscure.com, with 4,000 members. So I get so many results. So it's not only my information, but from thousands of people that generally experience the same thing, that to get a good night's sleep, you have to start winding down, maybe 1 or 2, preferably 2 hours before. And you can do that by reading a book. That is one of the most restorative things you can do. Listening to music, dimming the lights, calming yourself down with something that you can see on your watch is calming, because it's not necessarily calming. So many people find out that what they thought was calming them down, like watching Netflix and having a bag of crisps, will keep their stress levels way into the night. And then they take that bag of crisps away and start reading instead, and then they get much better sleep. So and to have your bedroom cold, in Celsius degrees, that would be 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that would be in Fahrenheit.
But that's okay. We can talk Celsius. They can figure it out. ChatGPT.
Yeah, right. So that would be good. It should be also totally dark. Should be totally dark. You shouldn't be able to see a hand in front of you. If it's too much light, then it will disturb the melatonin production in your brain and make you less sleepy. So even if you wake up in the middle of the night, keep your eyes closed and breathe slowly and try to get back to sleep. Instead, many people advise people to get up, but I don't do that. Stay asleep. Start counting or breathing slowly and stay in the dark.
I think also, liquids, when we're thinking, just even if it's just clean water, just water, tap water in a sense, or bottled water, whatever, that maybe not drink so much close to that sort of restorative switch, right, as you're making it, because, at some point your body might have to,
go to the bathroom. Yeah. So it's better I try not to drink anything after maybe 8 o'clock, maybe 7:30 even.
Sure.
Have any. Sure. But before that, it's important to hydrate. So according to Andrew Huberman on his Huberman Lab podcast, that you should have 2.5 liters of water for the 10 first hours of the day. So if you start at 8 o'clock, you should then have 2.5 liter of liquid until 6 o'clock in the evening, and then you shouldn't drink really a lot after that. so that you don't have to get up at night. Yeah.
I don't want to walk through all of the things, but one of the things I think are very interesting, and this is the last one I'd like to talk to you about, is about active rest. And I think, in a sense, people think an active rest, doesn't rest mean just lying down? Yeah, to some extent. But can you define what active rest and what it is and why it's so important?
Yeah, active rest is ways of being able to calm yourself down so that you're not just letting your foot off the gas pedal, but you're also pushing in the brakes. And the best ways to do that is, and the easiest way is the breath work. To breathe slowly, to breathe around 6 breaths a minute seems to be a sweet spot for most people. So, for example, you breathe in for 4 seconds and out for 6 seconds, which would be then 6 breaths a minute. That is a way of calming yourself down. And then we're also tricking the autonomic nervous system, because when you breathe that slowly, it's a signal to this ancient part of your brain that it's quiet out there. We can rest and digest now. There's no imminent danger threatening us. So otherwise, why would he close his eyes and breathe slowly? So our brains our brains are in a dark space and needs the senses and interpret the senses and signals, physical signals, to make a decision on which state we should be in. Should we be in a restorative state where the immune system, comes out from the bushes and start cleaning up?
For sure.
Or should we be in the state ready for some fighting?
Yeah, because I've done some other research on these sort of hacking the physiology to calm down. Well, to calm down the autonomic nervous system per se, or the heart. And the other one I heard is when we are stressed, that the blood will retract back into the core of our bodies and our hands get all clammy and cold. But if you kind of warm your hands up, it kind of tricks the body that, because blood's flowing back to the periphery of the body, and that kind of does. Or the other thing is, when we're in a stressed fight-flight state, our metabolism goes offline. We're not really hungry because we want to just get away. But I also read that if you rub your lips, these are nerve endings, exposed nerve endings, part of the metabolism. So if you rub them, what that does, it stimulates the metabolism, and the autonomic nervous system thinks, as you said, okay, in this dark skull, in this cave that our brains are located, that's a stimulation. It's like, okay, he must be eating something. He's touching his lips or whatever, right? And that can also be a process. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. And it's also, there's 2 points to that, because as you say, if you're because you can be stressed in 2 ways. You can be stressed in the how do you say, that you think you can do it. It's a competitive state. So
like a challenge instead of versus threat.
Challenge versus threat. That was the word I was looking for. So if you're in the challenge mode and you think you can do it, then your heart rate will pump a larger volume in each heartbeat, and your peripheral arteries will dilate to give more blood into the peripheral organs, like your muscles and your brain and all your organs. That is when you are hunting. When you're going for that mammoth or lion or elephant, whatever you were hunting in those days, to increase the chances of putting down the animal. But when we are in the threat mode, there's another kind of reaction. Then the heart will beat faster, but with a smaller volume in each beat, and the arteries in the body will retract, so that there will be less blood flow to these organs. And this is what you can almost see in a soccer game in real time, when the situation shifts from one goal to another, that suddenly the other team seems to run so much slower, and the other one's so much faster.
Excellent example.
And this is, they believe it's because that the only time you were in the threat mode was when you were hunted down by the other animal. And then for survival, it was important to have little blood flow out into where they could bite you, and so you wouldn't bleed to death. But of course, many people are in that threat mode day and night. And that is probably part of the reason why they get all the diseases. Because if you are depressed, if you have anxiety, you die probably 10, 15 years earlier, not from mental disease, but from physical disease. So these organs may have a constantly lowered blood flow to these organs. So
and this is part of that, what you were talking about before, low-grade inflammation, right? It's just constantly on. You have this cytokine storm constantly, right? And your immune system's trying to deal with it. But everything in your book, especially, well, obviously sleep and exercise and eating well and such and socialization, these are all part of the exploration or the trip. Sorry, I can't remember the word you used. The sojourn or the journey.
Expedition.
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 I get everything else.
Yeah, it's because changing your lifestyle is really hard. So just like if you go out on an expedition, you know you're going out on a hard adventure. You need to be prepared before you go, and you need to be braced for some struggle. So is to make sure that people know that, okay, you need to put all your energy into this.
And because I think for me, the active rest was it was really great because, I talk about writing from a clinical psychology perspective. I'm constantly asking people to write, or what I call expressive writing. And basically, you know this, but the magic behind that and why it's so effective, it's almost like talking to someone else. But the idea is to articulate your abstract thoughts and emotions and write them out, put them on into so you can see the concrete words. And if it doesn't look right, then you do it. It's a way of processing. And what I also recommend, Torkil, is that people don't use a keyboard. Write it out in your own handskrift, your writing, your cursive, because what that does is that when our brains are racing, you can only physically write so fast. And so if you have to try to get your thoughts and emotions down on paper, your physical limitations of how fast you can write actually brings down the thinking. It slows down the emotions. And I'm presuming automatically from this great talk we're having is that it quiets down the autonomic nervous system because you're starting to process. That's why writing or I think talk therapy are two of the best tools anyone could have. And that could just be talking to a good friend, close friend, a trusted individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do writing myself. So I write a diary every day. So, and I mean, oftentimes, now I don't have time for it, but I do this longhand writing in the morning. This writing 2 or 3 pages of just intuitive writing. Just whatever comes to mind. So and that is nice to do in the morning because it can affect what you do in the day. Often you get the best ideas because you're still you're in the hypnagogic state, you're still a little bit just in your fantasy and you're starting the realism of the day. So it's a good time to write like that, the intuitive writing.
And I guess that's a great way of setting the filters on your reticular activating system, what you're aware of, what you want to pull in more of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I have many more questions, but I'm very respectful of time. We've gone just a little over an hour. I was wondering, is there any last advice or tips or suggestions you could leave with our listeners today?
That would be that it's possible to get control of this system. It to an extent that would surprise you, and you would be surprised what you will experience once you get your stress levels in orders. And I have yet to hear of anyone not getting any surprises or not benefiting from it. So that would be it. And maybe something as guys don't always talk about, but for women, the menstrual cycle is a big factor here. So just to mention that the women listening, that the week before menstruation, when you can see that on the curves of your watch, you can see the lowering of the heart rate variability. If you're able then for that week to diminish to mitigate the stress, to sleep more, don't train so hard, release the stress, then you can flatten that curve and get less of the PMS symptoms that so many people have. So that I would think is an important thing.
That's a huge tip. That's a very huge tip. Well, Torkil, it's been a blast. Folks, if you're looking for a fascinating read that will literally and metaphorically change your life, it's The Pulse Cure. It's available in, I guess, Kindle form or e-form and also paperback.
Is it audiobook?
An audiobook. An audiobook. Yeah. Great. Well, Torkil, thank you. It's been a blast and definitely an eye-opening conversation. And I'm glad we have this conversation because for selfish reasons, I get to pick your brain to understand your perspective. So thank you.
Yeah, very nice to talk to you.
Well, we covered a lot of ground today. From the importance of tracking health through heart rate variability to the profound impact that psychosocial stressors have on our mental and emotional well-being. Torkil emphasized how the interplay between our psychology, our physiology, and our behavior, how it's crucial in managing stress, and how self-awareness, how it can help us overcome negative thought patterns. We also explored the benefits of adopting a healthier lifestyle, integrating fitness trackers to monitor stress, and using writing as a tool to process our thoughts and emotions. We can call this journaling or expressive writing, but the idea behind it is to take our abstract thoughts and emotions and to articulate them into concrete words. And this is one of the best ways to process our thoughts and our emotions, and it has a direct effect on our physiology. Torkil's personal journey toward well-being, it was shaped by his father's death and his own lifestyle changes. It served as a reminder of the importance of proactive health management. We explored a lot in this episode, but if you want to do a deeper dive and actually understand to empower and take control over your health, I highly recommend checking out his best-selling book, The Pulse Cure, where it dives deeper into how modern technology can help us balance our nervous system and improve our overall health. And of course, as usual, you'll be able to find all the links to the book, the audiobook, the ebook in the show notes. Personal thank you to you, Torkil. It was a fascinating conversation. I learned so much, and my curiosity was completely piqued. I've been doing this now since I finished your book, monitoring my HRV, and I have to tell you that all those data points collected gives me so much insight into how I am doing physiologically, psychologically, and emotionally. And that has made me more resilient because there's nothing like having hardcore data to back up how you feel. Or at least that's my perspective. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can always rewind and replay to your heart's content. But if I may ask you for a slight favor, if you can go out there and recommend this podcast to someone you think could benefit from this episode or the podcast in general, you'd be doing me a huge solid. Well, thanks for joining me for this long-form discussion that you find on Mondays, and I'll see you Friday for Bite-Sized Fridays, which are episodes between 15 to 20 minutes. Until then, keep well, keep strong, and we'll speak soon.